Welcome back to the Growing Band Director Podcast. Hanging here with the Chicken Man, as he says. This is Kris Berg. Kris, how you been?
I'm doing good.
Good. Nothing like an informal flying start. So go ahead. You embrace the chicken label.
Well, I was just saying that, I love doing this for the kids.
Yeah.
I'm not making I'm not becoming a millionaire writing charts, putting out records, going around and working with students, but it's what I love to do, and I have a blast doing it with the kids. So it's for the kids.
So for the people who don't know the chicken reference,
Yeah.
what's the deal?
Okay. Well, the short story long. Um, back way back when I was in college, I did an arrangement of a tune called "The Chicken," which was written by a member of the James Brown band, Alfred Pee Wee Ellis, and Jaco Pastorius embraced that tune, became a tune that he played like everywhere he went. And there was a big band version that he recorded first on an album called Invitation,
Okay.
and it wasn't available, so I did a pseudo transcription slash arrangement of it, and that was when I was in grad school. And then in 2001, we published it, and it's gone on to become one
Huge.
of the handful of best-selling big band charts ever.
Yep.
And it's not because of my talent as a writer, but because it's the choice of the tune,
Yep.
and it's such a fun tune, and it still sells almost as good as my new charts some years, and
Hmm.
which is really what makes it crazy, because normally in the educational marketplace, as we call it, first couple of years are your big years, and then you dwindle in a handful here and there, and this thing just sells
Keeps going.
e- every year, and I'm just blessed and grateful by it. But because it was so popular, my what is it? Imitation is the sincerest form of flattery.
That's
So
right.
I like to flatter myself. So
That's right.
who is
So,
that?
oh,
Who do
it's
you
my
keep
daughter.
talking? Oh, your daughter.
She
Hey,
doesn't know we're
daughter.
recording. All right.
Oh,
We'll
okay.
we'll
That's
keep that in
okay.
there.
That's all right.
So
But basically, my editors had me write a chicken themed funk song ever since. Every year,
yep.
we're going to talk today about number 23, I think.
23 chicken songs. So, I mean, some of them are hilarious. Some of them are better than others when it comes to the title, right?
Okay, I was going
I,
to say
no, I mean,
some of them are better than others when it comes to the song too.
yeah, I wouldn't. Is my personal favorite is "Hanging with the Peeps."
Oh, there you
That's
go.
just one I like. I don't know.
That was a
Modern.
T-shirt I saw one Christmas, doing an all-region band in late November, and this kid, it had a big picture of one of those marshmallow peeps on it, and it said "Hanging with my peeps," and I was like, "Bam! There's a chart title." And I keep them on my phone. I got another 20 titles to go.
Really? Wow.
Yeah. So
So every year when you do one, you just they're all funk tunes, right? Except for this
yeah,
newest one. This newest
they're
one's
all
the second line tune.
the new one is a second line, which is kind of a New Orleans funk kind of groove. Yeah,
You're breaking the mold.
yeah, there you go. Well, my mother always wanted me to write something called arroz con pollo and make it a Latin chart, and I'm like, "Thanks, mom, I love you," and I gave her a big hug.
So I had a question for you. What
Okay,
is so you're a bass player for people who don't know
I am.
by trade. So is that sort of where you sort of have that funk background?
Yeah, I mean, yeah. But it doesn't matter whether I'm writing a funk tune or whether I'm writing a swing tune or something. Kids ask me all the time, how do you start a chart? And for me, coming from sitting in the bass chair, I typically start at the bottom and work my way up.
Hmm.
So I'll come up with a groove or a set of chord changes or a funk line or something like that. And if it's a funk bass line, and I'll put that down, and I'll come up with some chords to go over the top. And once I get kind of this section of a groove going or whatever, then I start singing melodies in my head and figuring out, what I think works well,
Yep.
that kind of thing. So
So
I know a lot of players that start at the top. They come up with, and I think they tend to be more your melody type players, your trumpets and sax
sure.
players who are arrangers.
So I got a couple questions that I haven't prepared you for at all, but I'm going to try.
That's okay.
Um,
We haven't prepared me for any of these. I don't think we're
um,
going
s-
totally off the fly here. This is all. No, go ahead.
got it. If people are looking for a young kid who's going to start as their bass player, what are
Yeah.
the couple traits they need to have in order to be a good bass player?
Um, a fairly decent sense of time,
Yep.
but and I will tell you my philosophy on time because I talk to drummers and bass players about this all the time. Um, you know what perfect pitch is, right?
I do.
Obviously.
Yeah,
Okay. Do you know what relative pitch is?
I think so.
Well, the way I always learned what I'm saying, what I'm calling relative pitch is the ability to sing any pitch from another pitch.
Okay.
So if I play a middle C on a piano, I could, if you go Here Comes the Bride, I found F, but it's not perfect pitch
Hmm.
because I didn't just find F out of my head. I found it from another thing. It's relative pitch.
Okay.
And you can develop a pseudo relative pitch, perfect pitch idea because if you just every time you go by the piano, you plunk a middle C and you memorize that sound in your head, then you can pretty much so you can kind of develop a fake perfect pitch.
Yep.
I think I think there are people born with perfect time, just
Cool.
like there are people born with perfect pitch.
Hmm.
But most of us, like most people, don't have perfect pitch. Most of us don't have perfect time. But if your bass player will be ahead if they have a relatively good sense of time to start with, and then you put in the metronome time. I
Yep.
mean, years. I would teach my students when I was teaching college. I want you doing everything with a metronome. I want you chewing cereal with a metronome. I want you practicing your scales with a metronome. I want you doing everything with a metronome. So you need to get to the point for me where you're uncomfortable when things are rushing or slowing down.
Yep.
It bothers you and then you learn how to fix it. So that, and I think a bass student has to have. I don't want to say they have to be a jerk, but they have to have the confidence to say I'm right, and especially in a big band and the other 16 of you over there, you're wrong.
I like it.
The drummer and the bass player got to have that kind of confidence. So a lot of times some of the hardest things to do when I do clinics are when you've got that shy, quiet, soft-spoken bass player who plays the same way they are
Yeah.
personality wise, and that can be a problem. When you've got the soft-spoken bass player who doesn't play like that, who plays like, I'm in your face,
Yep.
listen to me, I'm the man, that kind of thing. That's a perfect combination because then you're not dealing with all that ego, but they need to kind of play like they have an ego.
I also like the fact that bass players and drummers have to do it together because
Yeah.
sometimes, if you have a stronger drummer but a weaker bass player, it's not ideal. But sometimes if your drummer is a little bit weaker but your bass player can lead the drummer, obviously that's not ideal. But
No,
people need to think of the bass player as being equal to the drummer when it comes to the time.
absolutely. And I find that again, most of my what I do now are all states and all region kind of things. So I'm with the kids for 2 days. If I've got a weak drummer or a weak bass player, I'll make that rhythm section work because one can help the other get stronger even in a couple of days.
Yep.
If they're both weak,
Whoops.
then you got more work. You just got
Yep.
more work to do.
Yep.
Where it can be a problem, and I was actually in a rhythm section like this in college, where the bass player and the drummer were both extremely confident and capable players, and it never gelled
Hmm.
because they just didn't work well with others. They didn't play well with others.
Yep.
And I was in that kind of situation, and second semester they made a change, and then it got actually worse because they asked me to move on, and I was like, okay. And then the guy they got in had an even worse issue with overconfidence than I may have had, and he and the drummer, sometimes I heard they almost got into fisticuffs, over
So you,
things.
you mentioned a while ago, memorizing that middle C as you go by, and it makes
Yeah,
me think of one thing that I think a lot of bands can do who don't think about it is having their kids memorize. For us, typically it's B flat or
right.
even F. But if people do that, if they just have their kids start memorizing B flat And a lot of bands will start by singing B flat before they're ever allowed to play a note that
Oh
day.
yeah, yeah,
And
yeah. That's a great idea.
it's just an amazing thing that kids can do. Middle school kids can do. If you haven't tried that, they should.
Yeah.
But the reason I thought of that is because you were in my band room once many years ago, and I learned a fact about you that I wanted to share. If people
Oh no.
don't know this about Chris Berg, the nails on the chalkboard for Chris Berg is listening
Oh
to a
yeah.
band warm up, like
Yeah.
hearing everybody play all the different things. You can't handle that.
Yeah. Well, I try not to put myself in those situations.
Yeah.
And yet, the opening cut. Wait a minute, that's not the CD.
Let's talk about the CD.
The opening cut on the new CD starts out first measure of the tune on the it's published, it's Alfred. First measure of the tune says make those obnoxious band room noises that you make before the band director comes in and tells you to stop.
That's awesome.
And that's what we did on the album, and everybody just goes crazy, and it gets louder and louder and louder, and then just boom, the funk comes right out of it. And away we go.
So you showed us, but for some people are watching, some people are listening too. What's the name of the album?
The name of the album is Perspective.
Yep.
You know, one of the things I learned about 5 years ago is everyone's got their own perspective on things. There's two sides, at least two sides to every story, and just some life experiences, and realizing that my perspective wasn't the same as theirs, wasn't the same as his or hers. I mean, it was, you know, so that was the effect. And the opening cuts Modern Technology, which is one of the Chicken tunes.
Yep.
And we even have she was 11 then. My 11-year-old daughter plays on the album on clarinet. She's a very nice clarinet player. And I brought her in for that mass improv thing at the beginning, where everybody's just doing all their warm-up squeals and screams, and the trumpets are playing louder, and the saxes are playing Charlie Parker licks, and you know, and the bass player's playing.
That's not what my band room sounds like.
No, it's not. Oh, okay. Well, anyway, and she came in and did some great stuff on clarinet, because growing up with me, she absolutely understands what improv is.
Yep.
So I said, honey, just improv, make up what you want. So she started playing what she wanted, and then she squeaked. And she just like, oh, I'm so sorry. And I said, no, do it some more. I want more of the squeaks. But Miss Pilgrim says we're not supposed to squeak. Yes, but I want them. So she had to try and figure out how to make herself squeak again some more. So just to get that going on. So she's all her friends are quite impressed that she's at the time, 11-year-old on a internationally released jazz CD, you know.
So I don't know much about this album. We're going to listen to some stuff from it. Your first album, you had some guest players on, right?
Yeah. We had Wayne Bergeron and Clay Jenkins and a bunch of, I always try to, you know, I taught college 25 years, and I got to know a lot of the players in the industry. So, you know, I've built friendships and gotten folks to, you know, hey, would you like to play? The second album we had Phil Woods on, you know, that was a once in a lifetime opportunity for me. And for Phil, it's the only time he ever played with my band. So, you know, there's that bass confidence there, you know, but he had a great, I mean, he loved it. He really liked the tune. He really did a great job. And then this one is not missing the guest artists. So we've got Randy Brecker on there and Eric Marienthal.
Oh, that's it?
What's that?
That's it?
No. That's just to start, baby.
You're naming some of the heaviest names out there.
Yeah. Well, no, Eric's kind of thin. No, anyway. And then Greg Bissonette, the drummer who I was actually in college with. His brother Matt and I were friends in college, and so I got to know Greg through Matt. And then Bones Malone is on there. I've known Bones for 20 years, and he's also a North Texas guy. And then Sal Lozano, who most people may not know, but he's second alto in the Fat Band, unless Eric's not there, and then he's lead alto in the Fat Band. And he's a great player on all the woodwinds. And he does some flute and piccolo stuff for us on the closing track, which is an arrangement of Joe Henderson's Recordame. And Sal just sounds incredible.
Forgive me, maybe I should have done this research, but I did not. How many of the charts on there are published charts that people could play?
Everything.
Great.
Everything's on there. The only one I haven't cleared, and I will get this cleared one way or another, is I do an Elvin Jones Crash and Bash kind of arrangement of Sponge, which is a Brecker Brothers tune off of their Heavy Metal Bebop album, and we do it as an up-tempo swing chart instead of a funk chart. And
Cool.
Randy loved it, and was super stoked to play on it, and excited. He loved the chart. Excited that it was on there. But everything else, the only other one, and I just got this taken care of yesterday, is there's an Eric Marienthal feature on Footprints, the Wayne Shorter tune. But that one's cleared now, and so that chart can be bought, not directly from me, but I can steer people where to do that. And then several of the tunes are directly on my page on JW Peppers. I have a Kris Berg Jazz publishing page there, and you can get them off of there. And then Recordame and Modern Technology are with Alfred, so your favorite vendor.
Mm-hmm.
And From A to Z is with Kendor. And yeah, those are those.
Great.
Yeah.
One other thing I didn't prepare you for before we get into the other stuff.
I love this.
Okay, so I'm not trying to say that bass is a simple instrument, because it's not. But what's something on the bass that people don't realize is actually easy? Maybe like an easy trick that they could teach their school-age bass player that would help them sound better. Maybe it could be like a harmonic language thing, or maybe a technique that doesn't take a lot of knowledge to be able to teach or learn.
Okay. A couple of things I'll mention, easy things. Okay. I had a band director posted a thing, Chicago area, I want to say, somewhere in the Midwest, northern Midwest up there, posted something, and they made the comment, listen to my bass player, how great he's doing on this bass line. And I asked the band director, I said, or told the band director, try having your student move his hand, his right hand, the plucking hand, unless they're left-handed, of course, but the right hand closer to the bridge, further away from the neck, and play it again and see if it doesn't come out cleaner. Because if you're going to pluck hard, which I do, and I know there's a lot of players that play lighter than I do, but if you're going to pluck really hard, you need to move closer to the bridge so that there's more tension on the strings. Because what's happened is the students were playing up toward the neck, and we're getting a whole lot of distortion and a whole lot of fret rattle and fret pop that wasn't necessary for that style. Now, if you're playing grunge, heavy metal type stuff, that absolutely is the style. You want that extra picky kind of click sound especially if you're not playing with a pick. And so they recorded another thing with the hand further back, and it was like, man, now that sounds like $1 million, because they were bossa novas is what they were recording, and it was just kind of like, so that's one thing. Another thing on the bass to remember, and it's similar with guitar, is it's completely a pattern oriented instrument.
Sure.
Now I'm talking both electric and upright, but on electric it's so easy to see the pattern. I mean, it basically is like graph paper. You've got strings running left to right, and you got frets running up and down. So you learn a lick in B flat, or a scale, or a walking bass line in B flat, and you want it in C, just move your whole hand up 2 frets, and now it's in C. And so take advantage of that. When they're, it makes it, all of a sudden, oh, so I could play in the key of G flat because I just had to move my hand there and play the same kind of things. Yep, absolutely, you can. And then I see a lot of young bass players that work really too hard on some things, because like playing an A flat to a B flat, and they've got their hand stretched so they can play the A flat on the low E string and the B flat on the A string, and it's like, if you just move your hand up to where you play the A flat with the first finger and the B flat with your fourth finger, look how close that is, and how easy it is on your hand, and how clean it is not having to switch strings. And just, sometimes they play things in awkward ways. You just got to learn to embrace the patterns.
Recently, you were at Nevada Allstate, correct?
Well,
21.
Yes, but what we're going to talk about was I was not at the Nevada Allstate.
Right.
but I did the Nevada All-State.
Right.
So I got invited to do the Nevada All-State, and then COVID hit. And so they canceled all personal meeting kind of things. They didn't even have the music educator, jazz convention, none of that year and the year after. So
I remember it. It wasn't
yeah,
fun.
no, I seem to remember something about it. I read about it. Yeah. Anyway, I was going to say in the newspaper, but then, not very many of us read those anymore.
Yep.
Um, but anyway, so they asked me what I wanted to do, Zoom project with the Nevada All-State kids that had made the band. And she told me that several of the other conductors of other ensembles, not the jazz one, obviously, were doing like, let's get together and talk about, rehearsal techniques or talk about playing a certain style or whatever. And I asked her if I could make them guinea pigs. And she said, explain. And I said, this is Rochelle, the lady who is in charge. And I said, well, here's what I'd like to do. I'd like to give the kids a 32 bar standard. It's not a real standard, but it sounds like a standard because of copyright issues. I said, I'd like to give the kids a 32 bar standard, teach them some basic arranging techniques. And over 2 Zoom meetings, the kids and I together will arrange a big band chart. They will arrange a big band chart. I will orchestrate it, make all the parts, and send those to you. And then they made I call them those Brady Bunch videos that everybody came out of Zoom.
Oh, yeah.
All your friends record, and then you splice all their little videos together, and looks like the Brady Bunch went nuts. And so that's what we did. So I sent them this little tune, 32 bar tune, follows a standard format, like one of the old songs. And I taught them some basic arranging techniques. And then she had paired them up into pairs, and I gave them parameters, and I assigned them each 8 to 16 bars of something to write, and told them how to approach it and all of that. And then that was on a Tuesday night. And then they got everything to me by Thursday midnight. And by Saturday, I had taken all of the stuff that they had written and I had put it into a big band score and fully orchestrated it into a big band chart. One of the things I learned early on is that I had to not modify what they did because it wasn't my chart, it was their chart.
Yep.
There were a couple spots where some things they wrote I just honestly didn't feel were going to work. So I proposed alternatives. Here's what you wrote. Here's what I think might be a little better. Do you like it? Do you don't like it? And if they liked it, we left it. And if they didn't like it, we put it back the way they had it. And I was okay with that because, again, it's not my chart. It's theirs. I'm just the orchestrator. They're Danny Elfman, and I'm the orchestrators. Okay? For those of you that don't know who Danny Elfman is, go look it up. Anyway.
Of course.
Yeah. So then Saturday, I did the big reveal. And that's the most fun part is I show them like an 8-bar section of the score. And I say, okay, here's the melody you wrote. And here's what it sounds like with just a rhythm section. And then here's, say it was the sax soli. And then here's how I orchestrated the whole sax soli. I put in some little brass hits in between where you guys are taking breaths. And this is what your sax soli sounds like now. And I couldn't see them because on Zoom, if I'm got my big score up, I don't see all their faces anymore.
Yep.
But Rochelle Cowell told me that, oh my gosh, she said, you can't believe what their faces look like every time you did that little 8-bar reveal. Because I had everything hidden. Yep. And then I would just unclick the hide and it would all just jump up in their face and they'd be like, whoa. And then they'd listen to it. She said, and her sweet comment when we were all done was, this is the coolest Zoom project I think I'll ever see. She said, I've watched all the other All-State projects and they were all great. She said, but this was so interactive with the kids. Mm-hmm. And then once we did the whole reveal on Saturday, then by Monday morning, I had generated all their parts, sent them all PDF parts, sent her the PDF score, sent them the little MIDI demo. And over the course of the next 2 weeks, they had hired somebody to record it and make the video that you're going to see and everything. And they put it out. And now this is something that I've done with a handful of high schools. And I did it with the Metropolitan Area Youth Jazz Orchestra at University of Nebraska in Omaha. with Pete Madsen. I did it with their ensemble, and they premiered their chart at the Gen Conference that year. And it's such a great project. And here's the history behind the project. And I know I'm talking a lot, so I apologize. But when I was in high school, my junior year in high school, our band director taught a big band arranging theory class. He was a big jazz guy. He was associated with the Kenton Clinics, not as a player, but as an administrator, that kind of thing. And he loved big band jazz stuff. So he taught us this whole year of big band jazz theory. And at the end of the year, we wrote a chart. Everybody had a project to write their first big band chart.
Mm-hmm.
And only 2 of us finished it. And neither one of them were very good.
Mm-hmm.
But and part of my problem was, the music material that I picked was just so bad. It was a theme song for the Army Corps of Engineers in the mid 1970s. And it was a terrible ballad, so cheesy. And the tune, the chart came out cheesy too. Go figure. But you know what it did? It lit this fire to want to write something that other people play, and that connection between the composer and the performer, the communication of you putting something down on paper so that they can interpret it and either come up with exactly what you wrote or come up with their own idea of what you wrote. It's all magical. And it just, I never stopped writing after that. I still haven't. And if I can, I love doing these. Nobody has to fly me in to do this. It's cheaper than commissioning a chart. It's so much interaction for the kids. They get to premiere it on a concert or whatever you want to do and say, this is the world premiere of a chart that we wrote, and the kids just love it. And my hope is, just as a writer and looking for ways to support myself, is that, I could get a handful of schools that would do this every 3 years, because your jazz band turns over. And if you want to provide the same experience for those new kids, you do it
it's a great
again.
idea.
And if in the whole realm of the thing, 1 or 2 kids go on and become writers, man.
Yeah.
Or if just, if 1 or 2 kids every time I do it becomes someone that gets as much joy out of writing as I do, then that's magic. I love it.
All right. So let's listen to it.
Okay. So yeah, play it up to the solos, and then did you cue it up so that we can play the second half after solos, or we can just get there?
I got you. We talked about this.
Yeah, we did. I know. I'm just making you look like a miracle worker,
All right, here we go. Oh, what's the name of the tune?
What did they call it? I think we just called it. We called it the Nevada Jazz Project.
All right. So
was the whole thing. And yeah, let's just call it that for right now.
All right. It's about 2 minutes, the clip that we're going to listen to. So here it is.
for the kids, they're learning some very basic arranging techniques,
Yep.
and I just sent them a standard. I'm calling it a standard. It's based on the changes to Dearly Beloved, and it's just a melody, a new melody written to the changes.
So how did
Uh,
they? So say there's a trombone background, right?
okay.
Did like the lead player said, "Here's what I'm gonna play," and everybody else harmonized with it, or
No, no, no. What the kids mostly wrote were um, melody lines.
okay,
Okay, because here's one of the things I learned studying arranging in college. Everybody can learn the vertical. We can all learn to voice. Whether you do spread voicings, you do close voicings, you do parallel voicings like the Basie band did a lot, whether you do some of the unique voicing styles that Maria Schneider uses for all her dissonances and everything, or you do what Brookmeyer does, that kind of stuff. Everybody can learn to write voicings.
mm-hmm.
What separates me from some of, like, let's take some of the writers you have around there, Terry White, Craig Skeffington. What separates me from them or any of the other writers is what I put down that moves left to right, the melodies that I hear in my head. I love listening to Craig and Terry stuff because it's like, wow, I never would have thought of that for a melody.
Mm-hmm.
And they're both trumpet players. Maybe I come up with a bass line and they're like, wow, I never would have thought of that as a bass line. I don't know. But
Yeah.
but I'm saying that what we write left to right is what makes us different from other writers, because
That's great.
the up and down can be learned. And so what I really worked on with these kids was left to right. Okay. And I gave them parameters, like the first 8 bars of the melody. I said, here's some things that you can do to it. I taught them some basic techniques. And then I need you to keep the ranges in this, no higher than a D above middle C, let's say, and no lower than D in the middle of the staff, because we got to build the tune. So that's where the melody needs to be for the first 8 bars. So every section that a pair of students had, I gave them little parameters and what to do to it.
Got it.
And yes, there were some hiccups. There was the one trombone player who loved playing Charlie Parker stuff, and so the melody was just like, no, we can't. No, that won't work. Can you simplify that? And we probably did it about 3 times before they came up with something. And then it was busier than I would like, but it reflected them. And then, so yes, none of the like the sax soli, the 2 gentlemen that wrote that, they wrote the melody, and then I did the harmony.
Got it.
If something they wrote needed to be reharmonized with different chord changes or slightly different chord changes, I did that.
Got it.
Little brass hits in between, those I came up with. But all the melody stuff, that's them. And that's why the chart sounds like what they think and not what I think.
So we're going to kind of pivot here and listen to some of Kris's pieces. We have, charts. They're not pieces. I apologize.
That's okay.
5 pieces of music. We're going to start with 3 that are newer. The first one is called Unleash the Chicken, and this is Chicken Series number 23. Tell us about it a little bit.
Well, before just the whole charts pieces, because I come from the jazz background, but I'm now writing marching band shows for some schools, and I have a couple commissioned concert band pieces and stuff, and I go in and call them charts, and the kids all look at me like, what? What's a chart? Anyway, so yeah. Anyway, okay, so this is Unleash the Chicken. Which the inspiration for the title, I'm going to say almost 10 years ago, Burger King came out with a chicken sandwich and had a T-shirt that said Unleash the Chicken. And the school it was actually my old high school. I was their guest artist / adjudicator for their jazz festival that I actually helped start when I was back in high school. They bought me one of these T-shirts and they all signed it. And then I saw the T-shirt and I was like, feature chart title, they just pop up everywhere. People offer, I have different folks,
So tell us about it. Who's the publisher? What's the grade level?
The publisher's Alfred. It's just out. It's the newest of the chicken charts. I believe it's 23. And this time it's in a New Orleans funk groove, a second line kind of thing. It loosely uses the chord changes from the original chicken chart. Mm-hmm. And hence Unleash the Chicken. So I'm kind of taking the chicken and going in a whole new direction with it. The melody's different originally. It's got some some more stop time sections in it. But it's a grade 2. The ranges are all very accessible, and it's again the keyword I wrote down when I was making my own notes about this stuff. It's just meant to be a fun chart, and I think it is. So
yeah. All right. Before we listen to it, second line. If people don't know what second line music is, what is that? What is it, and what does it come from?
New Orleans. Well, originally would come back. It would come all the way from European marching bands. Goes into the New Orleans style of music where it gets mixed in with the jazz. So if you go back to the New Orleans funeral days where they would march the casket through the street, and there's an old James Bond movie with Roger Moore where this is actually like a big scene twice in the movie. But as they're marching through the streets to the cemetery, the music's very slow. But then on the way back, it's a party. Yep. And that's where this second line groove comes from. Second line, if I'm not mistaken, refers to in the old Dixie music, you had the front line, you had the second line. The front line were your clarinet, your trumpet, and your trombone, which then expand to our sax section, bone section, trumpet section as we go to modern big band. And the second line or the back line were the rhythm section players. So it's got a bit of a march feel, but with a swung eighth note. So you get that whole gun gun dun gun, that kind of polyrhythm in there. You know, it's actually a clave, a 3/2 clave pattern if you want. I mean, it's just New Orleans when jazz was kind of exploding there a century ago. It was such a melting pot, and a second line groove is, if you really think about it, it's a melting pot of a bunch of different styles.
Yep.
And then and it's just an identifiable style. I think I do a fairly good job of writing a basic groove for the drummer to pick up on, but there's so many videos now that a drummer can get online and you just type in how to play a second line groove on a drum set.
Yep.
And you'll get 39 different drummers that you recognize the name all telling you how to play one. Tommy Igoe, I think, is one of the ones that I often refer students to. He plays a second line groove because it can vary, just like a swing groove can vary, a funk groove can vary. Every drummer has their own favorite twist on a second line groove. You know,
I did. There's a Rick Hirsch chart called Beantown Blues Parade that's a grade 1 second line, and it has the easiest second line rhythm written down, and it's brilliant. So anyway, you're right. There's lots of different options. Yeah. All right, here's Unleash the Chicken. All right. There's another chart that we don't have on here that we put out earlier. When was it? I don't know. Recently, a chart called "Kick It," which is another New Orleans
Oh yeah,
chart of
yeah,
yours. I like that
yeah,
chart.
yeah. That
Um,
that was a commission for a middle school band in Arizona,
that's cool.
and the reference is one of his. It's a middle school guy. He's working with lots of trumpet kids, and it's the third valve tuning slide. Kick it.
That's
That's
awesome.
that's how he taught
Cool.
him to kick out that little finger and get that slide, that valve or that slide out there to help that intonation. So
Got to do it.
that's where the title comes from. And
Got to
that's
do
one of
it.
the things I love doing when I do commissions. Um, it should feel personal.
Yep.
So we bantered back and forth about titles. He had just taken the band to New Orleans. This is a school that's very much into the experiences for the kids more than like going to contests and things like that.
Yep.
So they had just gone to, I think it was the Gen Conference in New Orleans. So we were talking about kicking it on Carondelet. We left all references of Bourbon Street out because that might go the
Of
wrong
course.
way. But
Mhm.
kick it's what we came up with, and that, a lot of fun too. And New Orleans street music is such a fun groove. It's
It
fun to
is.
write.
It is.
So
All right. So our next chart is a Basie style ballad, sort of in the realm of Little Darling. It's called "If I Gave My Heart."
so that was if I gave my heart. It's a, like you said earlier, it's a Basie style ballad in the realm of Little Darlin', or I Left My Heart in San Francisco, those kind of tunes. So I think it's a great chart I think it's a 1.5. The ranges are really mild. It's great for teaching ensemble, because the horns are either, for the most part, horns are playing unisons or they're playing tutti, and they're all doing the same rhythms together. So you get a lot of working on different concepts.
Laying back, articulation,
Yeah,
all the things.
yeah, exactly. Style, ensemble, dynamic control, because the chart never really gets loud. It gets to a nice forte, but it shouldn't be like a screaming loud forte. A lot of the chart is mezzo piano, just because it's that ballad kind of concept, and there's no improv needed. And yet, one of the things that I did, because a lot of times when I work with the younger bands that this chart would be for, they have a piano player that can read, because they have all these years of studying piano, private lessons. They started when they were 3 or whatever, but they're very immature with the jazz stuff. So giving them chord changes and say, make up a solo, probably not going to happen. But this chart has all kinds of piano fills between ensemble melody, and it almost is like a piano feature. But it's this kind of thing that Basie would do behind the band. A lot of times, because he had Freddie Green going, he didn't worry about playing the chords. He just would play, his little, that kind of thing, or whatever,
and one thing that Terry and I just did a series, a 6-part series on all this rep.
Yeah, it's a great series.
And one thing, well, thank you. One thing that Terry and I always agree on is that, like, the grade level doesn't matter. And I'm sitting here as a band director who, my kids play anywhere from grade 1 to maybe 4.
Right.
But like this grade, you call it a grade 1.5. It doesn't even matter what it is. If it's good music and it would be beneficial for your kids. So many people are into, like, well, we have to play this. So people need to be flexible on the grade level.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that at all. Now, and different grade level charts can be for different purposes. You've got to do a concert with just the jazz band, so now you got to play 50 minutes. Well, you're not going to have the time to put together 8 or 9 grade 5 charts. But if you can find some easier charts that are good music, hallelujah.
All right, let's go to the next chart. This one's called Crossroads. Tell us a little bit about it.
This was written for a private Christian high school in the Oklahoma City area, and he just, he loves my writing. I've written several things for him. I just wrote a funk chart on Hallelujah Chorus that they play now at their graduation ceremonies, because the jazz band plays their graduation ceremonies. So as soon as they say, welcome to class of 2023, and off we go. So I wrote this for this band. It's a swinger. It's a little up tempo. It is a challenge, but the ranges are modest, and it kind of goes back and forth between modal and then some bebop 2-5-1s. But I think improv wise, it's a great learning thing, because the modal allows them to focus on just 1 or 2 scales over that section. And then the bebop section, if you listen to it, the bridge is like 2-5-1 in E flat, 2-5-1 in D, 2-5-1 in D flat, 2-5-1, and now we're back to C again. So then it allows them, they can take a lick. We were talking about the bass players, and I know it's not just a pattern for the horn players, but you can take the same lick that works over 1 and down a half step and down a half step and down a half step. And so it provides a lot of opportunities to learn.
And I just wanted to throw this in here too. We've mentioned this on prior podcasts, but if people are new to this, when we say 2-5-1, I think we talked about, so if you're in C, like D minor, G or G7 and C, right, in the basic way. But why that's so important is 2-5-1 is all basically 1 major scale. So we call that a key center. And then if you're analyzing chord changes for your own band and you see like F minor and then B flat 7 and then E flat, well, you can have them play the entire E flat scale over all of that.
Exactly.
So for people who don't know that, that's sort of a big thing that when I learned that like changed my teaching. So all right, let's listen to it. Here's Crossroads. All right, next chart is called A Water's Edge.
At Water's Edge. Yeah,
At Water's Edge.
Yeah, it was written for an honors band in the Maryland area, and it's a kind of that contemporary straight eighth note, floaty, Matheny influenced kind of tune. It's got some nice orchestral hints behind it. A very haunting melody, I think.
So obviously you like the chart because you wrote it, but tell us, what do you like about that?
Well, I do like the chart, and yes, because I wrote it. I think it's a great contest piece. When Metroplexity, my big band, when we go out and do festivals, I don't typically do a traditional ballad. I try to keep, we're only going to do a 45-minute set, hour set. I want to keep it higher energy. So this is, to me, is the perfect alternative to a traditional ballad.
Mm-hmm.
It's got intimacy without being quarter note equals 60, that kind of, and I'm nothing against ballads. Don't get me wrong. That's just me,
But you're smart. I mean, there's a lot of times you hear big bands play for school age kids who've been at Allstate for 12 hours,
right,
and then they play ballads at 9 o'clock at night. So
yeah, exactly.
There's a place for that.
So this is a good alternative. Like if you were going to typically the contests around here, if you're competing, you're going to do a fast tune, a slow tune, and a fast tune. This could be used as a slow tune. I'm really proud of it. It won two. The whole album has won 5 Global Music Awards, which is an international awards thing that you apply to and send off recordings, and they judge and so forth. And this one won 2 of them, one for performance, one for composition. I stole an idea from several of Fred Sturm's charts, And this is one of the things I think that makes this chart cool for your students is each of the two soloists have different solo sections. The the trumpet has a solo section based on the chord changes of the tune, and the tenor sax goes back and forth between two chords. But all of the solo sections can be played with a C melodic minor scale. All of the chords are derived from C melodic minor. So like an E flat major sharp 11, sharp 5, to all the chords. So, and yes, they can approach it in many different ways. But the younger student, when I use this with honors bands, the younger student, I just cue them in, learn this one scale. And it's a very hip scale. It's a hip sounding scale. Immediately, these young kids sound like they've been playing jazz for like 10 years.
It's great.
Because they're getting way beyond the major scale sound. Nothing wrong with the major scale sound. And it's just one scale. And so that was one of the brilliant things, many brilliant things about Fred Sturm. I love his writing. But I was like, ooh, that's a cool idea. I'm going to do that. Now my guys on the recording, they're often wherever they want to go. But for a young band, I just think that's just a great positive of this chart. Ranges are pretty modest. It's got a lot of drama to it. I just think I like it. Obviously, I put it on the album, so I like it. And it's probably not as hard a chart as we would typically play on an album, but I just liked it that much. So
yeah, and we're featuring it here, which means we really like it. So that's on the album, as is the last tune that we're going to do called Perspective.
Yep, and this is a title cut.
Yeah.
And this started out, we talked earlier about, me with bass lines, right? Right. So can you hear the piano when I'm banging on it?
Yeah.
Okay. So if you listen. Owner of a lonely heart. Okay, that's the bass line from Owner of a Lonely Heart by Yes. And I turned it into an ostinato for bass trombone and bass, and then did a different kind of harmony over the top than what Yes did. And that became the basis for the whole first half of this chart. And the idea of perspective, this is a very contrapuntal chart. So if you're looking at it for educational purposes, it's going to teach your horn sections independence. Okay, because that idea that you've got to listen to the people that are playing what you play, but don't listen to the people that aren't playing what you play, and developing that, that kind of thing. Because the chart starts out with one line and then goes up a half step, and another line gets in, and up a half step, and another line gets introduced. So there's a lot of that going on. And then, I tell my arranging students this all the time. We are products of what we listen to. All right. It seeps in. If you're a musician, you have to be a product of what you listen to. Well, I was halfway through this chart and I was really stuck. Like, I don't know where to go after the solos. And for whatever reason, I was going through a binge of watching B sci-fi movies. Things like Giant Gator versus Mega Sharknado, things like that. And this one movie shot in New Zealand, and the pseudo classical music that's going under the intro had this rhythmic thing going on. And I was like, oh, that's cool. And man, it's even like the right tempo. So immediately I turn the movie off and I run into the office and I start beating out this rhythm and coming up with my own chords to go with it. And then put more contrapuntal stuff over the top, and borrowed some techniques from another of my favorite writers, Kim Richmond, on the West Coast, where he does stuff. And like, he'll do contrapuntal lines, and instead of when they meet being on happy thirds and fifths, they'll be on ninths and sevenths and things like that. So you get all this dissonance, And so that's what happens after the solo section. It goes into this pseudo classical kind of thing. And it just turned out to be a lot of fun. So that's what this is.
All right, let's listen to it. Here's Perspective. Yeah, it's just so great to listen to all of your music, Kris. This has been a lot of fun.
Thanks. I had fun too. You know, this wasn't as painful as you said it was going to be.
People want to reach out to you. I'm sure they can do so very easily. Kris Berg Jazz, and Kris with a K, right?
Yep. Yeah. So the website's www.krisbergjazz.com. There's email on there to contact me, phone number to contact me. Even if you want to mail me a letter, you can contact me. The coolest thing is the third CD is just out now, and we've got it worked out on the website. We're behind the times, but you can actually download tracks directly from my website now. Cheaper than Apple, cheaper than you wherever you download stuff from.
Yep.
So you want to, you don't get all the good stuff. You don't get the 12-page novel that goes with it with all the cool pictures and everything. But if you just want the tracks, they're 99 cents a pop, and you can download the whole thing. So that's one of the cool things we're about. And as Craig Skeffington would say, I'll be rolling in my tens of dollars pretty soon.
We sincerely appreciate you taking your valuable time and listening to the Growing Band Director podcast. Your students are very lucky to have a band director like you. If you have any suggestions for episode topics or think you have an area of expertise to share on a show with us, please reach out. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to subscribe. And if you want to help spread the word, please give us a 5-star review and tell your band director friends to subscribe as well. We're available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, our YouTube channel, and wherever you listen to podcasts. Thanks for listening to The Growing Band Director. See you next week.